Hello, everybody. This is JD Gunter with the Sub Creators, sitting here on a hot, hot summer July evening. It is about 7:02 my time, and yes, it is still hot. This is episode number 5, and we are speaking with a very interesting gentleman. Last week, we talked with another interesting gentleman by the name of Rex Christian, a writer, artist, and poet. This week, we are talking with a gentleman who has actually collaborated with Rex a couple of times. Gentleman by the name of Doc Blalock. Doc is another comics creator. He is also a painter, an impressionist painter, and he has elevated he has upped his game to the point where he is actually known as the Monet of the South. Let me bring him on. Doc Blalock. Doc, how are you?
I was told there'd be a buffet.
Nope, no buffet, no bar. I am so sorry. You don't want to be drinking alcohol in this heat anyway.
No, I just wanted the buffet. No, I'm
Nope.
good, brother. I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
No problem whatsoever. Hey, so is it true? I believe that I have seen that you are known as the Monet of the South. Is this the truth?
One little reviewer made that comment,
Okay. A
and
little reviewer?
yeah, just a little reviewer. And
Okay, okay.
I don't honestly don't even remember what showing that was, but there was a gallery
Mm-hmm.
showing, and that one in particular, if I recall, wasn't a solo show. It was me and another guy,
Okay.
and totally different art styles. I remember that.
Mm-hmm.
He was kind of a Wyeth type painter from the Hudson River
Oh,
School.
like Andrew Wyeth?
Yeah, and
Oh,
and
awesome.
yeah, and I of course kind of the Monet School of Impressionism.
Mm-hmm.
So very different, but it's wonderful stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can personally attest. I have seen your paintings both on your social media and on your website. Uh, Doc, what is your website? Could you
I can drop the link to it.
yeah, yes, if you could actually.
Yeah, I can do that.
Awesome.
Um, the store function is not currently working,
Okay.
but if anyone wants to purchase things, just contact me. All my contact info is there.
Yeah, definitely. Anybody that does collect art, I would definitely recommend that you hit this guy up because this guy, I've seen his stuff. The landscapes that he does, they're very moody, they're very dramatic. They are impressionist, obviously, but they are totally awesome. They're absolutely
Thank you.
awesome. You're
Thank you.
very welcome.
Appreciate that. That's very kind
Yes.
of you.
So, Doc, could you explain for the people that are watching right now? Uh, who are you? Who are you?
Well, I'm Christopher Doc Blalock. Doc comes from being a hospital corpsman in the Navy, the Marines, of course. If you are with them,
Awesome.
they give you the title Doc. And I've been a lot of things in my life, but I am a retired counselor. Uh, and before that, I worked in medicine, and that medical training came from the Navy, and that was where I got my start. But all along the way, since high school, I've been doing art. I did my first professional work when I was 16. Still
Mm,
in school, I designed the logo for Future Stock, which was an adult literacy program offered by one of the local technical colleges. And if I'm not mistaken, that logo may still be in use. I don't know. Um, this is the South. Everything moves slow here. So it may
it's all
be,
right.
it may still be in use. Um, so yeah, I started off doing fine art, and it started with portraiture, doing charcoal sketches and that kind of thing. Then I started doing charcoal landscapes. Then I discovered oil paints and I started painting landscapes in oil. Then I discovered acrylics and I never looked back. Uh, because nobody wants that drying time, on an oil painting.
Mm-hmm.
Someone says, "Oh, I'd like to buy that painting." Sure, you can buy it, but you got to give it 2 months to get bone dry before I can ship it. It's hell on sales. So
Mm-hmm.
in the '90s, um, I, uh, I found myself temporarily disabled, and I was like, I can't do nothing. I can do art, and then I thought, well, what art can I do to make regular money? So I applied to some of the comic book companies. Of course, I applied to the big two, but I applied to a bunch of the small companies, and I got hired. So I was doing comic books in the '90s for about a year and a half,
Mm.
maybe 2 years, uh, but still painting.
Right.
And then I got better, and my practice grew, and I worked as a counselor, but I was always painting, always painting, always painting. Now, flash forward to when the world ended under the lockdowns,
Mm.
and the fine art market just evaporated. It dried up, and I couldn't give a painting away. And they've been selling for thousands, doing really
Mm.
well.
Yep.
And I remember I had stumbled across, it's cliche, but I stumbled across Ethan's channel, EVS.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so I was watching that, and I just kind of, on a whim, I super chatted him and just said, I kind of wish there was something like this for fine artists, because I did get canceled in fine art. By the way, that's a fun story.
Mm.
um, and he pulled up my website and he reviewed it with Billy Tucci and Artie Bear, and they were like, "Ooh ah,"
Wow.
at my art. And Ethan said an offhand comment as we was moving on to the next thing. He said, "I don't know what to tell you, bud, man. Come do comics with us." And I went, "I know how
Mm.
to do comics."
Mm-hmm.
And so I jumped back in, and here we are.
So everybody has at least one moment. I mean, everybody starts out reading comics when they're really, really young.
Mhm.
Was that the first time that you jumped back into, comics? You say that you got work with one of the smaller companies,
A
not with
few of them.
like who are some of them? Like what if I can ask?
Yeah, sure. One of them it's defunct now. It's Pocket Change Comics. I did
Okay.
Assassinate the Mind Stalker for them,
Mm-hmm.
Half Naked Girl.
Mm.
Uh, I did a team book for Fusion Press called Alpha Strike, and then I created a property and drew a full-on ash can for it that same company picked up and did with a different artist called Mech Six. Um, and I puttered along doing that stuff for a little while, and then I didn't lose interest. I got better and was able to go back to counseling practice and all that stuff. So I just left it behind, uh,
Right.
but kept painting. But yeah,
Yeah.
I jumped into comics at a young age. 1976 is the first time I bought a comic I wanted.
Yep.
It was a Captain America comic, and then on the spinner rack at drugstore, I discovered, oh, Captain America's in this other book with all these other superheroes that I didn't
Mm-hmm.
know. And so then I began collecting Avengers and Iron Man and the Submariner and the Invaders, and I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that little collection, of course, there was no real collecting back then. You just saved the ones that you liked.
Yeah.
So I remember I had a boot box that was the perfect size, and I would just lay them in there flat.
Oh,
And
yep.
then I filled up another boot box and then another one. And then, life moves forward. I joined the Navy, and my mom does what all moms do with all kids' comic book collections, out the door.
Yep.
Yep, gone. So in the '90s, I started collecting again, and then I got robbed. I went to a
Mm-hmm.
conference in Virginia Beach, and while I was gone, my apartment got broken into, and they stole my entire collection
Yep.
and sold it back to my LCS, who bought it happily.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'm still pissed at him. He knew that was my shit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I've had that. I've never had it sold back to someone, but yes, I have. I've had somebody break into my place
Yeah.
and steal about $22,000 worth. I'm pretty sure I interrupted them. Uh,
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
So I don't know if they were armed or anything like that, but yeah, I've had that happen.
That's
But
horrible. Horrible.
yes.
Now,
So yeah,
that
yeah.
happened.
Go ahead.
I was going to say that happened, by the way, back in the 90s, like 95, 96, maybe.
Hmm.
Um, and then I didn't buy any more comics. I was over it, done.
Yes.
Then when I jumped back into it, I found all these wonderful indie creators, and I won't buy the mainstream garbage, but I'll back the indies and get my
Hmm.
comics. So I have some of Carissa Grant's. I have Southern Gothic. I can't even think. I've got a nice little stack of indies,
Yep.
and if I do collect any more, they're going to be indies. They're people I like, people that I back because I like them and I like their project. I
Mhm.
like that there's no political agenda in it. It's just storytelling.
Yes. Yep. That's that is, I don't want to get too far into the weeds when it comes to, politics and stuff like that.
Right.
But one of the main keys to this show, to the sub creators, is um, it's the idea that when a person creates something, they are reflecting God, who has created everything. He spoke everything into existence.
Right.
He maintains everything. He
Yeah.
thinks on so many levels beyond what we are able to,
Yeah.
that it's really hard to try to comprehend.
Right.
So it's easy to just kind of turn God into this cartoony old man in a baby blue bathrobe and
Mhm.
Apollo hair and beard, and he's always angry all the time. But
Right.
no,
No.
yeah.
No.
But whenever we create something, and it doesn't matter if we work with words, if we work with pigments and paints, if we do, comic pages, trying to do the, penciling and inking, or if you're doing it digitally,
Hmm.
whatever, we are reflecting what it is that God does. And He gave us that
Right.
ability. That is, and I think that
Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
it's so totally awesome. I think.
God is my father,
Yep. Not. Yep.
and so I imitate Daddy. You know,
Mm-hmm.
he made all the real stuff. I can't do that, but I can
Yes.
create stuff because he gave me that spark to do it. He gave me a little touch of talent,
Mm-hmm.
a little drive to go with it, and he said, "Okay, that's cute. Go make your stuff." And I'm like,
Yeah.
Thanks, Dad." But yeah, I am a Christian, uh,
Mm-hmm.
uh, unapologetic, born again in 1976,
Very
and
cool.
you know, I've got a wee touch of sailor mouth, uh, but other than that, I try to live
Oh
my
yeah.
faith. I try to live
Yes.
my faith.
Mm-hmm. Um, so the idea of sub creation, that is something that comes from J.R.R. Tolkien of the Lord of the Rings, and I kind of want to maybe just address that a little bit, and then I want to jump back into painting. I kind of want to talk about that
Sure,
in
sure.
relation to Tolkien. So this is the first time I'm going to try to do this. Can you still see the show? Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, very good. Because right now I have a quote from Tolkien. It's kind of extensive,
Hmm.
but this is from his essay called On Fairy Stories, and this
Hmm.
came from a lecture that he delivered
Right.
during a writing conference all the way back in the 30s, if I remember I have it right.
Yeah.
But this is from a section. This is where I first read this.
Hmm.
Um, and Innes, he says, this is Tolkien speaking, the human mind, endowed with the powers of generalization and abstraction, sees not only green grass, discriminating it from other things and finding it fair to look upon, but sees that it is green as well as being grass. But
Hmm.
how powerful, how stimulating to the very faculty that produced it was the invention of the adjective, no spell or incantation, and fairy is more potent. And that is not surprising. Such incantations might indeed be said to be only another view of adjectives, a part of speech in a mythical grammar. The mind that thought of light, heavy, gray, yellow, still, swift, also conceived a magic that would make heavy things light and
Hmm.
able to fly, turn gray lead into yellow gold, and still the still rock into swift water. If it could do the one, it could do the other. It inevitably did both. When we can take green from grass, blue from heaven, and red from blood, we have already an enchanter's power upon one plane. In other words, in the figurative, in the ideas, and the desire to wield that power in the world external, in the real world, will only God can make those kinds of changes. That's my interjection there.
Hmm.
It does not follow that we shall use that power well upon any plane. We may put a deadly green upon a man's face and produce a horror. We may make the rare and terrible blue moon to shine, or we may cause woods to spring with silver leaves and rams to wear fleeces of gold, and put hot fire into the belly of the cold worm. But in such fantasy, as it is called, new form is made, fairy begins, man becomes a sub creator.
Yep.
That is where the idea of sub creation comes from. Now,
Hmm.
Tolkien talked, he was a philologist. He taught words, he taught language. That's
Hmm.
what he was interested in. He really wasn't as impressed when it comes to fantasy and taking these things that God had already made and, taking an eagle's wings and putting them on a horse when it comes
Right.
to visual, especially like the stage or films and stuff like that. He just
Hmm.
had no tolerance, no patience, but he did have some patience for painting. He
Hmm.
and if you know anything about Tolkien, he could paint. Like he took his imagination, and when he wasn't using words, he used painting to uh, to illustrate
Yeah.
how to take these various things and to create new combinations with them. Like here is an example here. I'm sure that you've seen this, of course, this was on the cover of the Ballantine edition of The Hobbit. This is um, Bilbo with all of the dwarves in the barrels riding down into Lake Town. That
Hmm.
was this is an example of Tolkien's work. This is Smog. This is directly what Tolkien would think of when he wrote all of that out. And if you've
Hmm.
ever read the description of him describing smog on that big mound of gold, this is
Hmm.
his visual representation of that. And then I really love this one. This is again from The Hobbit. This is the trolls when
Hmm.
Bilbo and the dwarves, they get set upon by the dwarves or by the trolls, excuse me. And this is, I mean, just take a look at how he has the smoke. He has all of this. He has, of course, the trolls behind there, and then you have, you know, Bilbo kind of there in the foreground, kind of in the shadows. And
Mhm.
that is an example, I think, of Tolkien's using pigment, paint, visuals. How do you what goes through your mind when you do a creation in paint? Like, what's your process? What's your process of sub creation when it comes to painting, if I can ask?
Sure. When I paint, let me explain for the audience.
Yep.
I'm a plein air impressionist painter, and that means the process. I drive around and I find a beautiful scene and I stop and paint it
Hmm.
because it's beautiful. Now, the main thing you're looking for always is the light, the play of light on whatever. It almost doesn't matter what the subject is. It's what is the light doing. So I remember, for example, I was driving and I've got a F-150 and I always carried my painting gear in the back of the truck.
Hmm.
And I was driving through a less than savory part of town that had a drainage ditch running down that looked like a little stream, and it had these lovely branches overhanging it, and it was overgrown with weeds. But if you didn't know you were in the unsavory part of town, you would swear you were in a mountain creek, and the light was just dazzling. Stopped, set up in the back of my truck, started painting.
Hmm.
Had some unscrupulous individuals scoping me out. Didn't care. You've got typically about 45 minutes to an hour before the light will change.
Hmm.
So I pick a leaf and I say, when the light on that leaf changes, I'm done, because then it's not the same painting anymore. So you paint very
Yep.
fast, very fast. Now, you're not always able to capture it all in one go. So you come back in the same light at the same time the next day. That one was easy to capture. So I knocked it out quick. But some of the bigger ones, you go back 2 or 3 days in a row and you stand there and you paint what's in front of you. But that's the whole process. I uh, I try not to overthink it. I start with the simplest motions, and they're big motions. You paint from the shoulder uh, with your eyes, spending 80% of the time looking at the subject matter, and only 20%, well, 10% on the canvas, 10% looking down at your paint. Uh, so you want to keep your eyes on what you're painting. Not on your canvas. If you focus on your canvas, you're going to overwork. You're going to screw it up.
Hmm.
So I started doing that. I'm self-taught, but I'm not. I had the greatest art teacher in the world in high school who never taught me to paint. I never picked up a paintbrush in his room, but he taught me how to art, and that was good enough. And so, as a young man, I discovered, strangely, George Perez from comic books and Claude Monet from Impressionism at the same time. And I and I didn't understand there was supposed to be a difference between the two. I just started doing both. Uh, and Monet's words, were, you were not painting a flower, you were not painting a tree, you were putting a pigment on a surface to represent a flower or a tree. And that always stayed in my head. And he said, don't paint trees. Paint, I see a squiggle of pink. I see a blob of white. I see whatever of yellow. Paint what you see, not what your brain is telling you those things are. So I'm not painting trees. I'm painting this big gray shape in front of me, and it has light on this side and it's dark on that side, and the shadows are. He had another great quote. He took he took Cicely Renoir and someone else with him. I forget who. Out to do their very first plein air while they were at Glaze Academy in France, and they're out in the woods. And he said, "Do not presume to tell me there is no color and shadow when I stand here looking at it." Before Monet, they didn't put color in shadows, and Monet saw the color in the shadows, and so that's what he painted, and that's what I do.
So what you're talking about there is, if I was going to, and I actually did a little bit of painting for a couple of months. This was years ago,
Hmm.
and um, the person that was showing me how to do things, he said something similar, that and I kind of got it because I actually started to see things just a little bit differently when it
Hmm.
came to color. If you are going to paint a sky with dark clouds rolling in, you're going to automatically grab a dark gray or a black or something like that and start
Hmm.
painting your clouds in what your mind says this is what storm clouds look like,
Or
instead of what you're actually seeing.
right, or your brain is telling you those are clouds. Don't paint clouds. There's a blob of
Yes.
white. There's a blob of orange. There's a blob of
Hmm.
blue. That's the way I approach it. Just what is it I'm actually seeing, not what is my brain telling me those things are.
That's kind of, and I don't know if you, because you write as well as do things visually. If
Hmm.
I right,
Yes.
do you do you sometimes have to shut off one part of your mind that's more verbal than the more like if I do a tiny little bit of drawing, it
Hmm.
stinks. I'm not good, but I still do a little bit of it. But it's almost like what I do to write words, to do things verbally, it kind of gets in the way of when I'm doing things visually. Do you run into that at all?
Uh, Not really.
Okay.
Because I don't have ADD in the clinical sense, but I have art ADD. So, like while I'm drawing a comic book page, I'm writing script in my head at the same time, and I'm hearing dialogue, and I'm making mental notes to remember that. Or when I'm painting, I'm composing music or a song, as I'm doing it, because
Hmm.
I firmly believe if you can art, you can art, and it doesn't matter what form it is. It's just a matter of application. Are you willing to do the sweat labor to get good at it? So, like, I play several instruments. I paint, I write, I draw. Um, am I brilliant at all of them? I think I'm a better writer than I am a painter, a better painter than I am a drawer. Uh, and music falls somewhere in there, depending on how out of
Hmm.
practice I am.
Yes. So I actually have, the problem with me is writing comes easier to me than art and things like that. So um, whenever I start to quote unquote do, when I think of art, and art can mean writing, it can be just about anything.
Sure,
It can be
absolutely.
even counseling. Counseling, I think, could probably be an art if
Any
you think
creative
about it.
endeavor is art.
Yes, but when I would draw, when I would draw, I would do. You're talking about, you would begin to hear dialogue. I was doing some exercises. I actually got one of those Joe Kubert cartooning courses. Uh,
Hmm.
I don't know if you've done one of those before, but I did the horror one of those,
Okay.
and I did an exercise in creating characters, and I started doing this character, this grotesque royal, almost like a king, but he's in his like a nightgown because he's scared of something, and he's almost a comic figure. But as I
Hmm.
was drawing this guy, I started hearing his voice in my head. Yeah, he would say this. Yeah, he would say that.
Hmm.
And I've never heard somebody describe that before.
Sure. And I think Tolkien was afflicted the same way. He's creating these stories. He's writing Middle Earth, The Hobbit,
Hmm.
and it's an overload. It explodes out of you. You've got to visualize it. So here's a painting, you
Yep.
know,
Yep.
and that's just the way it goes. All of my writing starts with not an outline, not a plot, not even character creation. I hear either a narration or a line of conversation in my brain, and I think,
Hmm.
who said that? Who did they say it to? Where are they when they're saying it? And I start building scenes and that fleshes out a character. Oh, that's the character that said it. Well, where does this character live? What does he look like? And
Hmm.
that's how I create. And Lori Calcaterra and I were talking about this. I can be sitting staring off into space doing nothing, and if someone says, "What are you doing?" I'm working. I'm
Yes.
writing in my
Yeah.
head before I ever sit down at the computer and start writing the story. It's in my mind, and it's almost complete before I start.
Hmm.
So, you know, paintings are just kind of the same way. I set up and I look and I go, yeah, this is pretty. I will paint this. And then my brain goes in neutral, and my eyes and my soul just do the work.
Hmm. Um, I remember taking a class in. It was kind of like an introductory class. I got my was taking master's degree type classes from a local university. And one of the things that they talked about in one of the earlier classes was the, they were talking about the levels of skill that someone can have. And
Hmm.
they were comparing soccer players, how their bodies they'll know how to turn a certain way to block
Hmm.
or to drive a ball down the field or to do a goal, or and it's like their body does, they don't think about it, their body does it when they
Hmm.
get to that certain skill level. And they were applying that to just about anything, including
Hmm.
reading, writing, research, and things like that.
Sure.
how how long do you, I mean, it's different for everybody, but when you were teaching yourself, when you were just okay, I'm going to get serious with this, I'm going to drive around, I'm going to see something that grabs me, and then I'm going to start painting it. How long when did you start feeling it's like your hand takes over, you've
I,
got that skill level where you start painting on your
I
own?
I did several studies. So I had this beautiful coffee table book of Monet's work, and I replicated probably 100 Monet paintings, uh, stroke for stroke. Just
Mm,
and I began to understand his process as I did it. Excuse me.
it's all right.
And then just one day I visited some friends every morning for coffee at the same time. And right next door was this beautiful gazebo, and the morning light was dappling through the trees. And I thought I could paint that because I have learned to see the way Monet was seeing. So I sat up out there 3 days in a row and I painted it. And that very first painting sold as soon as I finished it. Somebody driving by
Mm.
saw it and they wanted it, and they paid me more than I ever thought someone would pay for a painting. And
Oh, that's cool.
from that point forward, I could just do it, um, and without thinking. Now, if working in the studio, like in the wintertime, hell no, I'm not going outside. It's cold out there. Um, I become a studio dweller. So all through the spring and summer, I'm taking pictures that I want to paint, and I'll replicate those in the studio. And that's when I do exploration. I wonder what would happen if I did this or if I did that. I would watch other painters in different styles. Like Stuart Davis is a great tonalist here on YouTube. He's an older gentleman. He lives in France, but he's British, and he does tonalism paintings. And I liked them. I was fascinated with how he did clouds versus how I did them. And he said he was reading his comments, and someone said, "Can you do this with acrylic?" And he said, "No, you can't do this with acrylic. He's painting in oil." And I went, "Oh, the hell you say?" So I went in my studio and I did it with acrylics, and I sent him a photo of it. And he said, "I stand corrected. I can't do it with acrylics, but this guy can."
Mm.
And so that kind of became a joke between us. Um, it's just in the winter I explore, I grow, I learn, and in the spring, not here recently, and for the last 2 years now, I've been doing comic books, which is a very different animal. You go
Hmm.
from this to this,
Yes.
and my hand hurts a lot.
Oh, um, I've heard some people describe, like, I think it was Stephen King. He talked about he would write with a pencil more if he could, instead of just using a word processor or something like that. But when he uses a pencil and paper, it comes out of his hand so fast that when he's done, it's like his hand was like on fire and it aches.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, the last 2 days in a row, I walked out of here working on I'm doing some commission work for Laughing Rogue, and I
Hmm.
walked. I walked into, my wife was in there watching a movie, and I literally had a cramp in my finger, and it wouldn't straighten up, and I was like, I have a cramp. So went and soaked my hand in some hot water, took some ibuprofen. Well, the next day was my damn thumb, same thing,
Oh
and
no.
it. I told you, I think backstage, my parents fussed at me for the way I hold a pencil.
Hmm. Hmm.
And apparently there was a reason for that, because the way I hold it, I guess, generates cramps. Uh, but
Oh,
didn't do it when I was young. But I'm not young anymore.
yep.
So 8 hours of drawing will give you hand cramps, and they hurt.
I remember seeing a video of Neil Adams, and he was using a pencil to draw with, and he would talk about, in the Western way, you hold a pencil like this,
Hmm.
but in Asia, and he was holding a pencil just like you
Yeah,
were using the side, like you were going to use the side of it, but
yeah,
he was drawing with the tip, but not
yeah.
like this, but yeah, exactly, just like that.
Now
Yeah.
this is also, by the way, how you paint. You hold on the back of the brush as far out as you get, and at shoulder length. And when you're laying down a composition drawing, you start. I teach art, so I say it starts in the eyes and it moves down the arm. So shoulder, then elbow, then the very last thing is this up tight. But
Hmm. Hmm.
when you're doing a comic book panel that's only 3 inches by 5 inches, now you're here,
Yes.
and there's a lot of it.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, you can do your layouts nice and loose and shoot from the shoulder and big motions, and nothing wrong with that. That's the way I recommend doing it.
So and that's something that I've never really considered. Whenever I pick up a brush, the very few times that I've picked up, I would use it like a pencil. I would hold
Yeah.
it like a pencil, and then no, okay, but that makes total sense. You hold it from the back, and then do all of that, and then as you start to get more detailed, you
Hmm. Yeah.
you start
Yeah.
moving up toward the bristles,
Yep.
toward the
Yep.
toward the brush. Okay.
Now in my paintings, I never get to this. I think occasionally if I'm doing like a spidery little limb, it'll be this,
Yes.
but that's just more of a touch thing than it is anything else. But
Mm-hmm.
most of my paintings are 100. Like, I think toward the end of my last run of painting, I was using the cheapest brushes known to man, and I've got the expensive ones. All this whole studio is set up for painting. I've got
Mm-hmm.
expensive brushes, but I was using cheap 50-cent chip brushes, 1 inch brushes, and just going to town painting with those, and producing work just as good as with the expensive brushes. So it's not necessarily what you're using; it's how you use it. We've all heard that, uh, but
Mm-hmm.
it's more about how you learn to see than any mechanical thing. The mechanics come, it's just automatic. It'll come with time, with repetition. Uh, I had a good friend of mine that said, anybody can be an artist if you're willing to shed the tears.
Tears and in well, expand. Tears in what way? Just basically tears as in
Frustration,
uh-huh.
frustration.
Mm-hmm.
Why can't I do this? Well, you can, but you got to push through that.
Mm-hmm.
um, I've had many students that they'll freeze. They'll have something good going, and then now they're hesitating because they don't want to mess it up. And I will tell them,
Uh-huh.
put your hand over your eyes, and they do. I want you to take your brush and just smear it in the middle of your canvas. Now make something out of it. You didn't
Huh.
screw it up. It's just paint. Nobody will die.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not screwed up. If it's oil, you can wipe it away. If it's acrylic, wait 5 seconds and paint over it. You're good. You can't screw it up unless it's watercolor, in which case you're screwed. Watercolor is witchcraft. I do not condone it. I hate it.
Watercolor just seems like it seems like it was just easy. It just seems like, I mean, that's what you teach a little kid to do. Why
It's the
wouldn't
devil. It's the devil. It
what
goes
makes
where
it so difficult? What makes it
it,
so
it
frustrating?
goes. It goes where it wants to go. You can't wipe it off, and you can't change it once it dries. Now you can paint
Mm.
over it, but
Hmm.
even that's not easy to do. So I remember I did try watercolors, and I can do it, but I remember the class I took because I would teach at Hobby Lobby here, and then I taught at an art school. And at Hobby Lobby, I took a class from another teacher who was a watercolor painter, and she said, "Now make sure you take your sponge and wet your paper really well." And I was like, "Why in the hell am I doing that? That's just going to make a big soupy mess." And then the very first
Hmm.
brushstroke I laid on, I did it like in my mind, like oil or acrylic will do, and it went
Hmm.
and just started spreading. I went, "Hey, that's not what I wanted." Don't worry, we'll turn it into what we want.
So you're kind of like when you're teaching, um, when you're teaching painting and you have a student that gets to that, oh no, I'm gonna mess it up. It's almost like Obi-Wan Kenobi in Star Wars, the first one. Put the blast helmet on Luke. I can't see a thing. Stretch up with your feelings.
Yeah, yeah, it's learning. There's something I say over and over and over again. It's just paint. Nobody's gonna
Hmm.
die. You know, it's just paint, and there's nothing you can do to screw up a painting. Nothing. It's impossible to screw up a painting. You just keep working till you get what you want. If it's
Hmm.
oil, it's going to stay wet, and you just keep working. If it's acrylic, you wait a minute, it's dry, paint over it, keep going, and
Hmm.
you'll get where you want to go. You just have to push through, and you have to be willing to let go of your fear and take chances. And it always pays off, and I mean always pays off. You'll get there.
We could probably. I don't want to see the one thing that the danger of this particular channel is, looking at creativity through a kind of a biblical lens, is
Hmm.
that I don't want to suddenly turn it into a Sunday school of the YouTube.
Right, right,
But
right.
I that kind of makes me think, not being afraid to make mistakes. That kind of makes me think that if God knew all of the just how far we would fall and all of the pain and all the suffering that he would have to go through to to come among
To redeem
us,
us. Yeah.
yeah, to redeem us. Um, he probably, I mean, if that didn't hold him back,
Right.
why should we be afraid of
Right.
not doing something totally 100% correct in
Right.
whatever effort that we're going to do?
Right. Right. And there's my faith taught me that, and the military also teaches you what to fear and what not to fear.
Ah,
I'm not going to be afraid of a brush stroke. Get out of here.
mhm.
Of all the things to be afraid of, that ain't it. That doesn't make the list.
Yes.
Um, so yeah, uh, be of good cheer. Fear not, I am with you. Repeatedly verses of comfort. Old Testament, New Testament doesn't matter. God is a comforter. He's your father. He wants
Yes.
the best for you. And by the way, he wouldn't have made you pick up a paintbrush if he didn't want you to do a painting and have that experience.
Hmm.
So why not make the most of it?
Yes. That's I think I heard somebody say that there's like 360 some odd verses in the Bible with the theme or with the word specifically, fear not,
Fear
do
not.
not fear,
Yep.
be courageous, be
Yeah.
strong and courageous.
Let not your
Joshua.
heart be troubled. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
right. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course we all have God-given innate fear, like don't step on that timber rattle or he will bite you.
Yep.
That's a God-given fear. It's the
Yeah.
fear. It's that fear of doing the unknown that God doesn't want us to have. It's don't be afraid of the coming battle because I'm already fought it for you.
Hmm.
All you got to do is just step in there and claim the victory. I'm down with that.
Yep.
That doesn't mean you'll win every football game or every art contest or whatever. It just means that
Hmm.
your best is good enough. Don't sweat it.
And you're not doing it for your glory. You're doing it for His glory.
Hmm.
Even if you don't make any money, or I
Sure,
mean, but that's important. Yes, you want to get to the point where you can actually maybe pay
sure,
your bills with it. But
sure.
here,
Well, remember
uh
what Rush Limbaugh used to say: "Is a talent on loan from God."
huh. Yes. Yep.
And that's what it is. I don't want to hand my talents back to him pristine. I want them to be worn out.
Hmm.
You know, I want them to be just fragments of what's left because I used everything he gave me. I want to write. I want to compose. I want to play music. I want to paint. I want to draw. I want to do all. I sculpt. I sculpt too. I want to do
Hmm.
everything. Every creative spark he puts in me, I want to execute to the best of
Yes.
my ability.
That's something that I know some people wrestle with. Uh, is they'll it's like God has given them a lot of different talents, and they'll drive themselves to distraction, going, well, should I pursue this or should I pursue
Do it
this?
all. Do it
Yeah.
all, baby. Do it all.
Hmm.
Now, I do suffer from the affliction of whatever I'm putting my energy into in at that moment, everything
Hmm.
else is going to suffer.
Yes.
But I
Yep.
can quickly shift back to any of them. Uh, I hadn't picked up an instrument in probably, I don't know, 20 years.
Hmm.
And as my son was coming of age, I taught him to play guitar. And he came over one day. He said, "Let's jam together, Dad." And I was flattered. I was like, "Sure, I'd love to."
Hmm.
So we start playing a song, and he screwed up first, and he went, "Oh, I haven't played that in a couple of years." I said, "I haven't played it in 20. Let's rock."
Yes.
um, it stays with you. I guess is what I'm
Hmm.
saying. It doesn't go away. People say they're perishable skills. I don't think they're perishable. I think they just subside a little bit, but it doesn't take much to bring them back out.
No. And the when you share the talents that God has given you with others, that's how connections are made, human connections. And
Hmm.
that could be used for the gospel, that could be used for just
Anything.
building up people, for like that was a perfect, I think that that might have been a perfect time for you to build up your son at that
Hmm.
moment. Yeah,
Hmm.
I haven't done it in 20 years, jump in,
Right.
let's do this.
Right.
And you were helping him get through that fear of, oh, I just made a mistake in front of my
Yeah.
dad.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. There's never
Yeah.
any of that. Now in
Hmm.
turn, he has reached out and started writing a little bit. He came
Hmm.
over and painted with me a few times, and he's got the gift. He just hasn't put any work into it yet, or invested the
Yes.
work into it.
Yep.
But he'll paint like, the Santa Clauses or whatever for Christmas, and he'll sell them. They make money.
Hmm.
But he's come over and done serious paintings with me, and taken lessons in the studio. He's writing. He's a professional wrestler. Is one of his hobbies. Entertaining.
Really.
He likes to
Really.
entertain. Yeah. Um, so he's got that creative spark in him also. Uh, and I just I've always told him, just you don't have to pick one. Do them
Hmm.
all. But whichever one you're doing, do the best you can with it.
That's that is awesome advice. Um, man, I suddenly want to. I have a few questions, but let me just ask. So, what promotion does your son wrestle for, if I can ask?
I don't even know.
Uh
I
huh.
don't know the name of it. It's one of the little Russell America, I think.
Okay.
It's a
Yep.
little southern independent.
Hmm.
circuit gymnasiums and arenas here in the South.
Yep. Yep.
Uh, I know that he was, I don't know what the word is it cast or recruited? He was on the Big Show, but he was
Hmm.
a security guard arresting Ronda Rousey when she went on WWE or WCW.
Oh.
So he had to pretend him and another buddy were arresting her and hauling her out of there,
Hmm.
And then he got called as an extra for that wrestling show that
Hmm.
came on Stars. It was, I think it was called Heels. Um,
Okay.
and
Okay.
he was on there as an extra,
Hmm.
and so he loves it. He scares me to death doing it because they're
Yep.
basically doing their own stunts,
Yeah.
and
Yes.
there ain't no safety net. Uh,
No.
and I remember JD. All right, Daddy, when you come to this show, I'm the bad guy, so you got to boo me. I could not boo my own son. I just couldn't. I'm like, yeah, that's my boy. I say, oh, okay. I'm supposed to be.
Well, that's where you become a bad guy too. I'm rooting for him because I'm not a good person. I hate kids just as much as all the other
Yeah,
heroes. Yeah. Right. Right.
yeah,
Ah,
yeah.
oh,
But
that
it,
is so cool.
but
Hmm.
it's a hard thing for me to watch. I don't go to those wrestling
Yeah.
shows anymore. I mean, I watched them do a 15-foot ladder in the ring, jump off the top down to the concrete
Uh-huh.
floor. And I'm like, no, I can't. That's too much to ask of me. I can't sit by and watch this. I can't. I
Hmm.
cannot. I cannot. I'm not prone to panic attacks, but Jesus Christ, man, that's
Hmm.
anxiety inducing.
I was kind of helping out with a kind of a local Spokane area promotion, cigar box, cigar box promotion. You know what they used to call them back in the '70s. But
Right, right.
yeah, and it was, it's like, oh, wow, they're doing these crazy stacks of tables stuff that ECW and guys like Mick Foley would do, and yeah, it's like, oh my gosh, they're gonna wind up in the hospital, but nah,
It's
they
horrifying.
somehow do
Horrifying.
it. Yeah. Hey,
It it.
so oh no, no, go ahead, please.
I was going to share an image with you here of my son
Mm-hmm.
and his wrestling identity, if I can find it. Give me just a moment here. So he wrestles under the name of Paul Wolf,
Okay.
and here him is. Share screen. You have to tell it 20 times. There we go.
Kaboom.
So that's my son on the right.
On the right. Yep. Okay.
Yep. As
I can see
Paul
the film.
Wolf. KJ Impala versus Paul Wolf, Saturday, August 10th. As just tickets are $10 or whatever. And I've asked him, are you making money? He said, I make enough gas money to get home and maybe stop at Waffle House and get a bite to eat. He doesn't
Yep.
care. He's doing it for the love of it. You
That's
know?
yeah. Unless you make the big time, then pretty much that's all you're
Yeah.
gonna do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is kind of sad. I mean, I mean that's a buddy of mine was listening to he was listening to an interview with actor Bryan Cranston from Breaking Bad and Malcolm in the
Hmm.
Middle, and
Right.
um, Cranston was saying that everybody goes to they quote unquote go to Hollywood, and then they go, well, I'll go and I'll try to become an actor, I'll try to become a screenwriter within a year, and if I don't make it within a year, it's obviously not meant to be. And he goes, no, this is just like any endeavor that you do. You've got to put in years
Yeah.
to build up to where you want to be. The biggest thing is, how do you make your money while you're trying to make it
Right.
happen? And
Right.
the question that's kind of coming to me right now, you talked about the lockdowns, 2020, and all of that. When when the art, actual art started to just dry up, are things still that way?
Yes,
Or
they are under
why
this
do you think that happened? Why do you think that happened at that time?
I mean, the economy took a nosedive, and art is a luxury. And right now,
Yeah.
people are struggling to choose between gas, medicine, and groceries.
Yep.
So they're not buying fine art. Um, hopefully, that's about to change, and the
We'll
economy
see.
will bounce back.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'll revisit it. But I keep an eye on the galleries, the, the reputable galleries around the South here,
Yeah.
and I look to see how they're doing. I know a few of the curators. I'll talk to them, and they're like, we're barely keeping the doors open, blah blah blah. So it hasn't bounced back yet. It will. It will. Um, I mean, there was a time, uh, I remember, in the space of 2 days in a 48-hour period, our hot water heater went out, our washing machine died, and the computer in my truck went out. And I'm like, what am I going to do? I can afford to fix one of these out of savings, not all
Mm-hmm.
three. I
Mm-hmm.
sold a painting that day for enough to cover all three.
Oh, ha ha.
Because
Nice.
the paintings were just, they were selling about as fast as I could paint them back then. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and then it was like, when the lockdowns first happened, I kept right on selling, and I thought, oh, it's not affecting me. I've got a Facebook marketplace and I'm online, so
Mm-hmm.
I'm bulletproof here. The local gallery was struggling, and blah blah blah, and then mine just screeched to a stop.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't give a painting away.
So a lot of it has to do with dispendable income. But is there something? Is there something with in order to be interested enough in a painting? It's one thing to see something online, but
Mhm.
to see somebody painting that painting, and it's like the difference between a live event and a televised
or
event.
buying the album.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
exactly. So that you would see that there is something to that.
yeah.
It's not the whole thing, but
There's an artist hack for any painter out there. I'm going to tell you the hack right now. If you want guaranteed money in your pocket, you go to the richest neighborhood that has the most luscious lawn and grounds and whatever, and on public property, you set up and you start painting. And here's how it will go.
mm,
They'll peek out the curtains. What's he doing? They'll get in the car and make an excuse to leave, and they'll drive by you very slowly and just stay. Keep painting.
uh-huh.
They're going to come back in a little while. They'll slowly, and then after they're inside, about 10 minutes later, somebody's going to come walking out, and they'll look at what you're doing. And if it's good enough, they'll go, "Oh, that's beautiful." I say, "Your property was just so magnificent in this light. I had to paint it." Well, do you sell your paintings? Well, yes, I do. Usually through a gallery, but I guess I could sold.
Nice. Oh, so if you're watching this, you want to. This is a hack. This is a an art hack.
90% of the time, that's
Good
what will
Lord.
happen.
Yes.
Yeah, make sure, by the way, you see a car in the driveway. Don't paint an empty house. If they ain't there, they. I'm ashamed of myself.
No, no. I mean, in the Bible, you've got instances like, Jesus telling parables of a guy that has all of this debt. So he goes to all of his creditors and goes,
Mhm,
I'll give you X% of the debt. That way you'll at least get something out of it. And
mhm.
this is a story that Jesus is telling. Now, that may not be what God wants us to do, but I I don't know. There are ways to do stuff. It's not like you're lying. You're not trying to pull the wool over someone's eyes or something like that.
And I
But
give them a good
yeah,
painting. It's a good
yes.
painting. Like, I won't sell a bad one. And I have painted some stinkers. As a matter of fact,
Mhm.
that pile over there, that's my oh no pile. That's the I call it they can't all be winners,
Uh-huh.
but
Uh-huh.
they're still canvases, and I can still put gesso on them and paint over them and do something good.
Yep. Yep.
Every now and then, though, you'll run across what I call a cursed canvas, and nothing you do on that canvas will ever work. So those
Hmm.
go into the burn pile. And once a year, you go have a big bonfire and you burn all your crap.
Oh man. So on one of those cursed canvases, um, have you been able to paint the likeness of somebody and then the painting ages except for but not them? They stay young, but Dorian Gray.
Yeah, I haven't done a Dorian Gray yet. I remember I had a young friend that was an oil painter, and he was a hyper realist oil painter.
Hmm.
So we kept wanting to paint together. I said, "All right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to paint in your medium, but my style. It's going to be impressionism." So the owner of the gallery sat in a chair, and I said, "We've got 1 hour. Go." And he completely panicked because this was not his cup of tea at all. And
Hmm.
and I'm gooping in the oil paint, and I'm just slinging paint, and uh, about I don't know 20 minutes into it, I realize I'm dipping my brush every single time into something, and I don't even know what I'm dipping in. Is this mineral
Hmm.
spirits, or is this linseed oil? I don't even know what I'm dipping in. He goes, "That's my cleaning solution." And I was wondering why my painting was looking all washed out. I'm like, "You could have told me that." But we both did good
Hmm.
paintings. But mine was finished in the hour, and he was just barely started. He's like, I
Hmm.
can't, I can't paint that fast. And I said, well, I can't paint hyper realistic. I mean, I guess I could, I just don't. And I told him, you could paint my way, you just don't.
Hmm.
So, but it's all fun and games.
Plus, there was that pressure of go,
Yeah,
do it,
yeah, yeah,
brain lock.
yeah. It can happen. It can absolutely happen.
I guess, and also you couldn't do this because you'd already set up the terms and the conditions and the styles and all that. But I guess you could say, well, this is my Jackson Pollock here. just just stuff. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, vampire.
I have fought Rex. You mentioned Rex.
Hmm.
We get into knockdown dragouts. He says, "You're one of them people thinks art's got to be pretty." Yeah, I do, and it must also
Yes.
require talent. Anybody
Hmm.
can do a Jackson Pollock. Anybody. There's a famous video here on YouTube of an art professor at a college that said, "I showed my students for their final exam this image," and there's an abstract painting that pops up, and said,
Hmm.
"Interpret this painting." And they all wax eloquent, describing how evocative it is and everything. And then he shows them that's just his apron where he wipes his brushes off.
I think I might have seen that. I think
Yeah,
I might have seen that.
yeah, yeah.
Yes.
It's not art. Sorry, Rex, not art.
Or the famous one, the person that duct taped a
A
banana
banana.
to a canvas, and then
Hmm.
somebody rips it off and eats it.
A lady, true story, at a major gallery, accidentally left her glasses, and they roped it off like it was an art exhibit. And she's like, "No, those are my glasses. I just need them to see."
Yes.
That's not art. I'm sorry. There's the guy, 60 Minutes did an expose on it. This guy bought a vacuum cleaner still in the box and autographed the box and sold
Hmm.
it as art for
Hmm.
like $25,000.
That's a I've heard some people say that is a uh, it's a sign of a civilization degenerating when
Yes,
we can't make anything beautiful anymore.
correct.
Architecture,
Correct.
architecture. Just up the road from where I live, there is an Amazon distribution center. And this distribution center is a big square, 1 mile by 1 mile, and
Hmm.
it is painted in off-white, dark gray, and light gray stripes all around it.
Hmm.
And it looks like the world headquarters of a globalist conspiracy place in a movie by Tim Burton. Seriously,
Yeah, well,
Tim
Tim
Burton.
Burton, Tim Burton would at least have gothic stuff in there, you
Well,
know.
that's it. It looks. I mean, like
Yes,
I said, these stripes all around it. The term for it is called brutal architecture.
yeah, brutalism.
There
Yeah,
is nothing. There is nothing enlightening. There is nothing uplifting. It is just get in here, do your work. Now get out
yeah,
of here.
yeah. They
And
build steel and glass and concrete boxes and divide that box into little boxes inside, and then an even
mhm,
smaller box for you to be in. So you are just trapped in this horrible monster, this brutal monster that stifles creativity and beauty. And that is not food for the soul. That's not
no,
food
it's
for the
not.
spirit. I couldn't work in that. I could not do it. You know,
No.
I can walk outside, like I said, in the ghetto and see a drainage ditch and find beauty in it because God's in that.
Mhm.
There's light, there's greenery. There's nothing beautiful inside that place. Nothing.
No. It's one of the things that you think about. You think about the Ten Commandments. You think about "Thou shalt not," and most
Mhm.
people they get um, they get what am I trying to say? They get offended by it.
Yeah.
But when God created this place, when He created us,
Hmm.
yeah, everything is fallen
Hmm.
because of Genesis chapter 3.
Right.
Um, but everything is a reflection of Him. It's
Hmm.
imperfect, it's fallen, and all of that. It will be redeemed, and it's in the
Hmm.
process of being redeemed.
Right.
But um, when he created all of this, it reflected Him. When we create something, it's a reflection of us. And when our civilization, when it stops doing these beautiful cathedrals or even courthouses with flying
Hmm.
buttresses and things like that,
Hmm.
where
Hmm.
architecture is no longer beautiful and it is a reflection of us, when we have this ridiculously tyrannical looking building,
Yeah.
that I
Yeah.
live just up the street from, this Amazon distribution center, that is a reflection of where we
Yeah.
are at.
Think about
I believe that.
think about the Louvre, how beautiful that building is. And
I
then they put
want to
that
go there.
horrible glass pyramid in the courtyard.
Ah, okay.
It looks like
Okay.
something you bought at IKEA and assembled over the weekend
Uh-huh.
versus this magnificent sprawling castle with just soaring arches and colonnades and just marble floors and all this beauty. And then you put this piece of crap in the middle of it and go, look at
Hmm.
our art. That ain't art, Scooter. I'm sorry.
No, no.
Mm.
Um, we're talking about buildings being a reflection. Do you remember the Edgar Allan Poe story, the Fall of the House of Usher?
Hmm. Hmm.
There is a poem in the middle of that. I mean, the idea of a building reflecting the person that's inside it. That's
Hmm.
what the whole thing, or the family, the people that are inside this.
Right,
The
right.
Usher, the House of Usher had a gigantic fissure in the middle of it, totally gloomy. You know,
Hmm. Hmm.
but there's a poem, a symbolic poem in the middle of it called "The Haunted Palace," where
Mm.
it starts out. If you might have read it in English class or by
Yeah.
yourself at some point, and it talks about how this castle and Poe describes this castle like it's almost like a human face, a
Hmm.
face of a king that's fair, and you can see inside the windows, the eyes, and see that there is order and there's joy and there's hope
Hmm.
within this
Right.
building. But then at the end, it's described as um, the cerements, the banners and stuff like that are gray and tattered, and the windows are they're lit in red, and the
Hmm.
front door is thrown open, and this noisome throng is piling up, basically saying this is like the face of someone who's crazy,
Hmm.
and um, all this throng rushing out is like somebody, and
Just
laughs but
spewing.
smiles no more.
You're
Right.
right. Right. Just
It's insane laughter, this guy.
yeah. Yeah.
And that's like a symbol of what we make when we
Hmm.
go wrong. What we create is like that. And
Hmm.
I'm not against haunted houses. I love scary movies and Halloween and stuff like
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
But there's always a time where, okay, that was good. Now it's time for Christmas.
Hmm.
You know.
Yeah. Let's have a little beauty now, shall we?
Yes.
Yeah. There's. I get the functionality of a box. Okay, I get it. It's cheap to
Hmm.
build. It's cheap to maintain. You know. Uh, Heck, I cut my grass in rows. I'm not
Uh-huh.
organic out there just weaving around.
Yeah.
I get it. That's function, but there must be art also, and we cannot lose that. It's
Hmm.
too precious. It is subcreation. You know,
Yes.
yes, the world has fallen, but the grandeur of God is still present in the fallen world. It's here.
Yeah.
Jesus said, "If I tell them to shut up, the rocks will sing my praises."
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That's
Uh,
right.
and we see that in the water, in the sunlight, in the green leaves. Uh, in the azaleas. I love azaleas. You see God's glory in all of that stuff.
Hmm.
Where we see the fall is when I'm up there edging next to the curb on the asphalt. That's where the fall is.
Hmm. Like that. You mean like that black plastic stuff, or
Yeah,
like the metal kind of crenellated looking stuff.
right,
I,
right, right.
I I don't know if, yeah, it's kind of like that. But anyway, yes, yes,
Yeah,
just
the
making things, yeah,
ugly. They're useful,
ugly.
but they're ugly. Useful but ugly.
Well, let me ask one more question, then we'll wrap it up because I realize it's pretty late where you're at. So, how do you recommend that people, it doesn't matter if it's painting, if they want to become more creative and use all of the creativity that they've got, how do you recommend that somebody that's just Joe or Jane lunch pail going back and forth from work, and they have this little thing in the back, I'd like to be more creative, but I don't know, how do
Mhm.
you recommend that they share what they've got with the world?
Just do it. You have to do. All right. So there are three things you must do to succeed as an artist, and it doesn't matter what kind of artist you are. Number one, you got to make art. That means be proficient and prolific. Make a lot of it and get good at it. Number two, you got to show it to people. That's social media. That's YouTube. That's galleries. That's playing shows in front of, in front of the local grocery store. It doesn't matter where. And number three, stand behind what you do with integrity. You do those three things, you'll succeed. Now, the learning process, you have to push through the fear. Just do it. And by the way, I'm not a fan of the Beatles, but John Lennon said, "Give me a tube and I'll get you something out of it." Um, you don't have to have the best gear. You don't have to have the perfect drawing paper or canvases. You can make art out of just about anything. Our ancestors did it by spitting pigment on a wall with their hands.
Hmm.
They made art. You can make art too.
Well, awesome. Well, so Doc, uh, what are you doing right now when it comes to your art? Give me your pitch. let me throw your website back up again. But what's your what do you got? Like, what is it? Pitch, what you got? What you got? What do
All
you
right.
want us to see out of you?
Well, my paintings are there on that website, and you can see
Yep.
them there. And if you want, I'll have it. I'll sell it to you. Right now, I've got a campaign over on Fund My Comic called "A Damn Dirty Thing," and
Mm-hmm.
it is a noir comic starring Jake Bishop. I said paste. There it is. Starring Jake Bishop, a private investigator who happens to have a little magic about him. And oh, it said it failed to post. Let me put it in private chat here, and you
Okay.
can post it.
All right.
There it is. Everything's moving slow. I did it
Yeah.
twice. All right, there we go. And it's a 20-page, actually, I think it's 24-page black and white comic. Kind of a homage to those old black and white movies that we all used to love when we were kids, or at least I did. Maltese Falcon, The Big Sleep, Casablanca. Uh, it's my love letter to that genre. It's set in a world that's parallel to our own, but the aesthetics of the 1940s never went away. So they have our technology, but they have their sensibilities, they have their styles.
And I don't want to get. I don't want to. I don't want to make too much. Basically, wine noir. Like really quickly.
I love it. I've loved it since I was a kid. Uh, those rainy Sunday afternoons. Remember, you only had ABC, CBS, and NBC,
Mm, that's right.
but then there was one UHF channel, the Superstation, WTCG, became
Uh huh.
TBS later on, later became
Yep.
Turner. They would always play those old black and white movies from back in the day. And the very first one that stuck with me, and it's still my favorite to this day, is Casablanca. And I remember Rick saying when
Mm-hmm.
Rick, help me. God, he's being arrested. And he said,
Mm-hmm.
I stick my neck out for nobody.
Yes.
That
Yes.
line stuck with me. That mood stuck with me. And I think the ghost of that voice has bounced around my head for decades. And
Mm-hmm.
I was able to
Mm-hmm.
find that voice and get it out into something. And this is what that is.
That is awesome. Yes. Um, it's interesting. As right before we did the show here, I'm in the middle of an almost done with Elmore Leonard's Rum Punch, which was what the movie Jackie Brown was
Hmm.
made from. And if there's one writer that I love, used to be Stephen King when I was a lot younger, but he's kind of gone his own way. But Elmore Leonard, ah man, I am just crazy about everything that he wrote when he
And
was with
he
us.
did a lot of noir.
Oh yeah, and a
Uh,
lot of it was western that got
yeah,
turned
he
into noir.
yeah
Yes,
he wrote. If I'm not mistaken, then he writes some of the Philip Marlowe stories.
I know that. Oh, I can't remember.
Who am I
Raymond
thinking of?
Chandler, was it Raymond
Yes, Raymond
Chandler?
Chandler. Yeah. Yep.
Yes,
There you
yes,
go. There you
yep,
go. Yep.
yeah. Philip Marlowe. That's something I haven't read, but I'm saving that basically.
Hmm.
All right, Doc.
My writer, by the way,
Yeah.
my two biggest inspirations on my writing were
Yes.
Tolkien, obviously,
Uh huh.
and Tom Clancy,
Oh yes. Yep. Yep.
the master of managing these ginormous plots and being able to tie them all together
Mm-hmm.
into a satisfying story. Oh my God. I remember I was on duty in the Navy back in
Mm-hmm.
the 80s, and I got a copy of The Hunt for Red October, and I was on nights for a whole week. We call it night master at arms duty. You're not a
Hmm.
master of anything. You're just there to answer the phones. I read that whole book and I couldn't put it down. It was so good. I was sleep deprived all
Hmm.
week. I wanted to go home and sleep, but I wanted to read too. It was just
Hmm.
enrapturing. It was so good. And most of his books have been that way.
Yes. One of my favorites. I don't remember it, but just like you're talking about, he wrote a book. I read it a number of years ago. It's like he took every single 1970s vigilante movie idea and he put it all into one book.
The
It had
some Without remorse.
without remorse, yes, because you had crime on the streets, you had Russian chicanery, you had Vietnam
Hmm.
stuff, and it was, oh man, like I said, it was like every single 70s vigilante thing all put
The
together.
premise being uh, these people who think they're the predators on the streets have no idea what something like a Navy SEAL would do to them if you
Uh-huh.
crossed them, and that's what it is. And that, by the way, was what inspired me to write my first comic, Pariah Blood and Mud, because I
Oh.
sat back and just this thought popped in my head: uh, what would happen if they did that to a witch?
Hmm.
What would
Mm-hmm.
her revenge look like? And I went, there's a story. So I
Mm-hmm.
wrote it, and I did the first installment. The second one's something I'm about to start working on now. So yeah, I mean, Without Remorse is my favorite Clancy book. Intensely
Yes.
personal, and I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it is so visceral. You can feel the emotion just coming off the page.
Yes. Yep. No. Yeah, it's so cool. You've got all of these different, I mean, Tolkien and Clancy. And here earlier, you talked about Monet and George Perez. And it's
Hmm.
like, no, you don't have to. Well, there's the good one, and then here's the bad one.
Right,
Or this is the popular one, and this is the art one.
right, right.
No, you put them both together. Ray Bradbury did that all the time. He
Sure,
took science fiction and then he married that with Hemingway and all this arty stuff.
I love
And it was
Hemingway.
like, yeah, yes,
Yeah,
huh, yeah, I can,
the sun
yeah.
also rises. I read it once a year.
Oh, that is cool. Yeah, because it's all about the sea. You're all about the sea, and it's all about, old man in the sea and
Yeah,
surviving and all of it. All
it, it,
right.
it's good stuff,
Mm-hmm.
man. It doesn't matter
Yes,
what it is. If it's good, knock it out. Just go
that's
for it.
exactly right. All right, Doc. Well, thank you very much for joining us here on the Sub Creators. And can I have you on again in the future?
Anytime, brother. And of course, this is a two-way street. You ever want to be on the show, just let me know. You can catch my show Wednesdays at 1 p.m. here on the YouTube. Doc
Very good.
Blalock. I'm the only Doc Blalock on YouTube as of today. And don't fall for Dr. Blalock. He's hustling vitamins and supplements. That ain't me.
Oh, no. All right, Doc. Well, thank you very much once again. You have a good night,
You too, sir.
and you bet. Have a good one.
Peace out, everybody.
Peace out. Hey, I just now remembered Rex's thing. It's never stop collecting. I can't
Keep
remember. Oh
collecting.
no. Keep collecting, keep collecting. Well, if that's what you want to do, you do whatever you do.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Doc.
Yeah, man.